Hello, beautiful people. It's Sindafam. Welcome to the channel. Today, we're back again with another video, and this is about Diddy. So, we're going to check this from Law and Crime Network. The title reads P. Diddy's right hand woman breaks her silence, which we're going to check together, and I'll love your thoughts and your contribution at the end of the video. Let's dive right in.
The woman who has been described as the Ghislaine Maxwell to Sean Combs' Jeffrey Epstein has just broken her silence regarding these allegations surrounding her and her former boss. What does this statement mean for Christina Coram? Why make it now? And does this give us a clue about what role she may play in Sean Combs' upcoming criminal trial? We're going to bring on acclaimed criminal defense attorney to the stars, Bradford Cohen. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. A lot of people have been spoken out about Sean Diddy Combs since his legal troubles first began in 2023. However, there is one name in particular, one person allegedly connected to him who has really not said anything until now. And this could be significant. We are talking about Christina Coram. Now, for those of you following the Combs saga, particularly our coverage of it here on Sidebar, you might be saying, why does that name sound so familiar? Christina Coram has been described in lawsuits against Combs as the rapper's right-hand person, more accurately, his chief of staff. Actually, as reported by The Hollywood Reporter, Combs seemingly highlighted Coram in 2021 in a Facebook post writing, KK keeps everything in my life and my business running. She's been my right hand for the last 8 years and has consistently proven to execute and get S done. Don't know how I'd function without her. It's a very interesting connection to have a relationship that he describes, considering he's facing now criminal charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, transportation to engage in prostitution. And the thing is, she has been named as a defendant, not in the criminal case. She's not been charged with anything, to be very clear. But she has been named as a defendant and mentioned in various lawsuits. And in light of that, she is now speaking out for the first time. In a statement that was published by USA Today and first reported by Rolling Stone, she said the following, quote, "For months, horrific accusations have been made about me in various lawsuits regarding my former boss. These false allegations of my involvement are causing irreparable and incalculable damage to my reputation and the emotional well-being of myself and my family. I have never condoned or aided and abetted the sexual assault of anyone, nor have I ever drugged anyone. The idea that I could be accused of playing a role in or even being a bystander to the rape of anyone is beyond upsetting, disturbing, and unthinkable. That is not who I am, and my heart goes out to all victims of sexual assault. I am confident that the allegations against me will be proven to be untrue." So, what is she seemingly referring to? Well, how about the fact that she is listed as a defendant in an amended complaint filed this month by Ashley Parham, who claims that she was violently gang raped. And when I say violently gang raped, I mean the allegation that she was gang raped by comedian Drewski, NFL star Odell Beckham Jr., and violently assaulted with a remote by Sean Combs. But here is where Christina Coram, or KK, comes in. Parham claims at one point Combs held a knife to her and threatened to give her a Glasgow smile. But, quote, defendant KK told defendant Diddy that she did not think giving plaintiff a Glasgow smile would be advantageous to their potential clients who they could sell plaintiff for sex to. Defendant
Let me pause here first. You know what is interesting with this Diddy's case? All of this timeline, all of these things are things that lots of people really did not expect. Like, but interesting things that have been resurfaced and names is how lots of people are now wanting to get out or don't want to get involved. And we get it, it's Hollywood because I mean, man must shop. So people have to look for another way or look for or don't want to get involved or get dragged in some messy scandal, messy situation and whatnot. So obviously save yourself because y- you were doing your job. Yeah. But Diddy gets interesting, right? Right. You know, sometimes the PAs and the chief of staff they know the truth. Or some of the workers they know the truth, they know what's happening. But well, let's see how it goes. Share the trial. I think the trial is in May, right? Let's see how it plays out.
KK then made a threat to plaintiff that they could ship her off anywhere in the world and that she would never see her family or anyone she knew ever again. So as we do multiple sidebars a day, particularly on the Combs case, I am so busy, I'm always running around. There was also an accusation, I'm sorry if I have to get graphic here, there's an accusation that Combs had forced Christina Coram to use a syringe to insert an IUD into Parham. And apparently she and Combs argued over it, not over actually doing it, but that it wasn't going to work. And then there's this. When defendant Drewski finished raping plaintiff, defendant KK, Christina Coram, entered the room to examine the condition of plaintiff who was barely able to move or control her bodily functions. Defendant KK examined plaintiff to see if she needed assistance and was about to give plaintiff an IV fluid. Plaintiff cannot be certain if she did or did not receive such intravenous intervention. Defendant KK then opened a different bag, different than the one defendant Diddy removed the oil from, where plaintiff observed several medicine bottles, IV fluid bags, and other unidentifiable powder-like drugs. Defendant KK then removed a pill from one of the medicine bottles and gave it to defendant Diddy. And there were further allegations in the complaint that she needed to keep the plaintiffs in the case sufficiently drugged, that she carried around and gave out drugs, that she provided plaintiff with an IV, like I mentioned, which, by the way, is important because we know that one of the allegations in Combs' criminal case is that IV fluids would be used after prolonged, allegedly illegal sexual episodes, and that she tried to force one of the plaintiffs, an unidentified woman, to sign documents as well. By the way, in this case, she's being sued for racketeering violations, battery, assault, negligence, intentional and negligent infliction of emotional distress, unjust enrichment, aiding and abetting, sex trafficking, false imprisonment. But that is not the only lawsuit that Christina Coram was named as a defendant in. She was named in another suit by plaintiffs Latasha Forbes, Billy Cummings, Ian Fearon, Ahmad Jenkins, Fallon Matthews, LaQuay Applewhite, and Jane Doe, who claimed that, quote, she aided Combs in his abuse of men and women and basically covered up sexual assaults. She was also reportedly mentioned in other lawsuits, like one filed by a former employee, Phil Pines, who claims that Christina Coram would order him to clean up hotel rooms after Combs' wild sex parties. Again, another allegation in the criminal indictment against Combs. But remember, Christina Coram is not named as a defendant, neither is anybody else, but this is very interesting to hear that allegation. And maybe most famously, the first time I personally had heard of the name Christina Coram was when she was named as a defendant in the lawsuit brought by Combs' former producer Rodney Lil Rod Jones, who claims...
Exactly. That was where the name first popped up, and lots of people, lots of speculations, allegations, people keep talking here and there, and others. It gets all the more interesting, guys. It gets really, really interesting. And I mean, with all of the details attached in the lawsuit and all that, what do you think? It never gets old. And you know, sometimes employees, they know a lot. Oh, they know a lot, especially PAs and chief of staff. They know a lot. They know. But so far, so good. Lots of people will try to save themselves and save their head because they will not want to be dragged into this mess.
Sexual assault, harassment, violation of the racketeering statute. He claims Coram manages the day-to-day of Combs' alleged criminal and sex trafficking enterprises. For instance, he alleges the following, quote, Mr. Combs' chief of staff, Christina Coram, KK, instructs her staff to retrieve drugs so she can provide them to Mr. Combs for his consumption. And by the way, that included allegedly directing bottles of champagne to be spiked with ecstasy. Actually, I want you to listen to this description because there is a whole section of that complaint dedicated to Christina Coram where Rodney Jones basically makes the allegation that Christina Coram is the Ghislaine Maxwell to Sean Combs' Jeffrey Epstein. That's what it says. And of course, we know that she has been the associate of deceased financier Jeffrey Epstein, who ended up getting convicted of sex trafficking charges, sentenced to 20 years in prison. But quote, according to Mr. Jones, during the 13 months he lived and traveled with Mr. Combs, he witnessed defendant Coram openly order her assistants to keep Mr. Combs high off gummies and pills. Defendant Coram required all employees, from the butler to the chef to the housekeepers, to walk around with a black Prada pouch or fanny pack filled with cocaine, GHB, ecstasy, marijuana gummies, and Tucci. According to Mr. Jones, defendant Coram wanted Mr. Combs' drug of choice immediately ready when he asked for it. According to Mr. Jones, defendant Coram ordered sex workers for Mr. Combs. On one occasion, she sent Mr. Jones a text message requesting that he call a particular sex worker. We have the message. According to Mr. Jones, defendant Coram ordered and distributed ecstasy, cocaine, GHB, ketamine, marijuana, and mushrooms to Mr. Combs and his celebrity guests who were present on his rented yacht and in his homes in LA and Miami. According to Mr. Jones, on multiple occasions, defendant Coram forced him to carry Mr. Combs' drug pouch against his will. The pouches were always black, and several of Mr. Combs' staff carried black Prada pouches. According to Mr. Jones, defendant Coram also sent Mr. Jones to solicit sex workers for Mr. Combs. When the sex workers arrived at Mr. Combs' residence, defendant Coram would negotiate their price and would take them aside and pay them. By the way, he apparently claimed that when he spoke up to Coram about Combs allegedly groping him at one point, she allegedly told him, you know, Sean will be Sean. So now she makes this statement, and here's the thing. Again, she is not named as a criminal defendant in Combs' criminal case where he faces these charges that I mentioned before. But what role could she play? What does this statement say overall with respect to the lawsuits? But what does it also say about a potential role in the upcoming criminal trial? I am made of questions when it comes to this. So for that, I sat down with acclaimed criminal defense attorney Bradford Cohen, who has represented stars like Drake and Kodak Black, to get his take. All right, Bradford, good to see you again. Thanks so much for coming here on Sidebar. All right, what do you make of...
But first of all, exactly that question. How is she involved? How is she involved? Because the right-hand person, the right-hand woman, how are you involved? Because, yeah, she's not mentioned. But, I mean, lots of people are putting her name or including her name in the lawsuit. Is it a coincidence, or do you think it is a coincidence? Is it not, isn't that really, really interesting?
That statement from Christina Coram, and why make that statement now?
Well, I think it's heating up, and I think she has to make that statement at this point because a lot of people are making accusations. I'm sure there's an issue in terms of the federal investigation and what's going on with the federal investigation and if they're going to be interviewing her or using her as a witness. So my belief is all those things are coming to a head. And I think that now is the time that she had to come out with something to say, hey, listen, I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea what happened. I have no idea that this was even in the realm of reality, which I find hard to believe that she knew nothing about anything. I don't find it hard to believe about the sex trafficking thing because I think, and I've said this from the very beginning, is the proclivity towards hiring prostitutes and paying them $10,000 a night for whatever, I think is something that the government is associating with the sex trafficking and making that their crown jewel in the case. I find that to be, very difficult to wrestle with. Because in normal sex trafficking cases, you think of something a lot different than those accusations. And I do believe that she didn't know the details of everything that was going on. I don't really find it plausible to believe that she didn't know anything was going on.
Here's the question I have, and I'm not surprised.
Because she is the freaking PA or chief of staff, as it's been mentioned, right? And we know PAs, personal assistants, or chief of staff, they know. They know you're supposed to be the right hand person of your boss, right? If you're a PA, you're a chief of staff. I mean, chief of staff is higher, top position above PA.
This statement came out now after she was more specifically mentioned in this amended complaint that I talked about earlier with Ashley Parham. She's really, there's specific episodes where Christina Coram is allegedly partook in this behavior, and these are allegations. But why not just remain silent or just have her lawyer say, we intend to fight this out in the court and not the court of public opinion. We deny all the accusations. Why make a statement? Is there a legal advantage? Because that statement is not going to come into a courtroom. It's not going to be used as evidence per se. Does it help her in these civil cases? Is there a legal significance to make a public statement like this? What do you think?
Legal significance, I don't believe so. I think that it's more goes towards, a jury that would be possibly reading a newspaper, knowing about the case, reading something, seeing something. It's just like when anything happens, it's good to hear from the lawyer. It's better to hear from the individual. If they're saying mea culpa, I didn't know what was going on. I had no idea, things of that nature. And I'm sure, like I said, now that she's more formally named, now that it's getting very close to trial time, I think it was a smart idea to come out with some kind of statement. I don't see this statement hurting or helping her. It's one of those innocuous statements that's essentially like, let's wait and see how things turn out. I'm going to be vindicated. That's kind of the standard when it comes to these statements that are made and the individual that are stating it. It's just, like I said, I think the heat is starting to be turned up on a lot of these different cases, criminal and civil. And I think now is the right time for her to come out and say, hey, listen, I don't know anything that's going on. I'm sure she's employed someplace else. I'm sure she has some other business that's going on. And my belief is it's probably hurting those relationships she has being associated with Sean Combs.
I want to go back to the criminal case. Do you believe a statement like this, and given the allegations against her, does this give you a clue about her potential role in this criminal case? In other words, do you think she could be called as a witness by either the prosecution or the defense?
Yeah, I couldn't imagine any universe where she's not called as a witness by either the defense or the prosecution. If someone is an individual's quote unquote right-hand man or right-hand woman, and they know the intricacies of what is going on day to day, their schedule, what they do, not so much an MO, a modus operandi of like, a crime, but maybe an MO of what they do day to day, right? And I always say this, like an MO day to day would be, hey, I go have breakfast at this certain place, lunch at this other certain place. This is where I go in the afternoon. These are the calls that I make during the day. If she knows kind of his day-to-day schedule and how he operates, the individuals that he knows, the individuals that came to see him at his office or his home, and she was there during that time period, I believe that she would either be useful for the defense or useful for the prosecution. Now, my guess is she would probably be a prosecution witness because when you become a defense witness in these type of cases, the prosecution starts looking at you very hard to see if there's a charge that they can file against you. And I don't see a lot of these people surrounding Sean Combs becoming defense witnesses, as opposed to when an FBI agent knocks on your door and says like, hey, you're a subject, but you're not a target yet. We want to talk to you about these things. And you could become a target depending on, how we feel you fall into this whole thing. And then all of a sudden, people come to the table with a lot different versions of different things that happened during their time with the individual who they're prosecuting.
See, here's my question, right? I agree with you. I think there's a strong possibility she could be a witness at this case because you think about what he's charged with, right? This racketeering conspiracy, this sex trafficking operation, this criminal enterprise. If I'm sitting on that jury, and by the way, we've had this conversation since this case began, no one else has been criminally charged in this case. And it makes me wonder if she is called as a witness and is, again, that's what makes the statement so interesting, right? She didn't come forward and be like, I am ready to testify about all that I saw, all that I heard. I was forced to do things that I didn't want to do. She's basically suggesting that I didn't know any about this. It's abhorrent behavior. if she takes the stand as a prosecution witness and gives them and taking these allegations as true, gives them everything that they need. Yeah, I organized this, I cleaned up this, I did that. If I'm sitting on the jury, I'm wondering, why is she not sitting with Sean Combs as a criminal defendant? Can she be asked about that? Can she be asked, did you work out a deal? How come you're not criminally charged? I think that's a big question, because out of everybody we've talked about, based on the allegations in the lawsuits, and it's a question of how much that actually is connected to the criminal case, she's like the central figure. If you're talking about a criminal enterprise, how's she not wrapped up into it? Unless these charges are not strong, or unless these allegations aren't real, unless she really had no part about it. See, that's where I'm struggling with her role in this. I think she's a very important player, but I don't know what she would testify to or what she'd be asked.
And you know what is even interesting? Somebody also made mention that um, what will happen if Diddy was to be set free because they don't have strong um, evidence or something, that the allegations aren't strong against him and all that. It gets interesting because, yeah, I'm interested to see how, or to know how this will play in court, because some things about it, and judging from the fact that some people filed the lawsuit and turned out to be that they weren't true. Yeah. What does she know? What does she know? What is she willing to say, or what is she ready to say? Will she ever take the stand to say anything? There may be a twist to this. What do you think? It's gonna get crazy or gonna get wild.
I will tell you, and just from experience, you have individuals that take the stand very often to testify against your client, because they make deals. And a jury isn't stupid. You can bring that out. What kind of deal did you make? You actually get the letter of agreement that they have with the individual who's testifying, if they are avoiding some sort of criminal liability, or if they're going to get some kind of reward at the end. And everyone always says, oh, yeah, I talked to them. Maybe I'm hopeful that I can get a discount at the end. I'm sentenced to 90 months and I'm hopeful I might get some time off, but there was no promises, no coercion, all these different things. And that's how these go a lot. But I mean, I've had witnesses take the stand, and I can't even tell you, they're testifying that they used to move 1,000 pounds of weed a week, and the prosecutor's not going to prosecute them for that. And, juries aren't stupid. They see that. They understand the motivation behind it. Now, does that mean they're not going to believe anything that individuals tells them? Probably not. They're still going to believe some things that they say, but it does go to their bias, and it goes to, their credibility of whether or not they are expanding on their knowledge, whether or not they're, throwing some extra things in to make sure the prosecution is happy with their testimony and they can get a significant amount of time off. And I always use the Sammy the Bull Gravano as an example, right? Here's a guy, they could have charged him with, I don't
So yeah, she is supposed to be the right hand woman of Diddy. So schedule, in fact, it's an interesting timeline, right? Interesting timeline. But again, there may be a plot twist to this, because ever since I saw that comment of they don't have strong, the evidence is not strong against Diddy, in my head I'm just like, exactly. I don't think anybody have actually, or lots of people have actually asked the question, like, what if he eventually was set free? Or maybe he was just asked to maybe do sometime few years, 5 years. What if that happened to be the case? And if all of this so happened to be that he didn't spend the rest of his time or the rest of his life in jail? What do you think? I would love your thoughts and your contribution in the comments below. But do you believe her? Because she's supposed to be the right man, right? Or right woman, right hand person. And we're talking about chief of staff, right hand. But again, just like what was said, it potentially is affecting other of her businesses, her work, and all that. And she doesn't want to associate herself with that. So lots of people are trying to get away or get out of this because they don't want to be dragged into Diddy's mess. But guess all the more interesting. That's all just gonna say. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. I would love your thoughts and your contribution in the comments below. Make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and all of that stuff. And until next time, see you in the next video.